Okay. Yeah, Boker Tov. Now, on this Mishnah here, on Daf Kuf Tes Zayin Omid Beis, there's an insight here of the Tosus Yontif. I don't know if we've ever spoken about him, but he wrote a super commentary on the Mishnayos. His name was Heller. And he writes that in the Hallel, remember we spoke about the fact that Hallel is split into two parts. Do you remember that? And for the first part of Hallel is integrated into Magid before Gal Yisrael, and the second half of Hallel is at the end of the Seder after we finish the meal. He writes, Rotzu, this you'll find on the bottom of the right column here in footnote number Yutes, Sherotzu lemayit ba'miras ha'halel lifnei ha'seuda. He says that they had a vested interest in condensing the Hallel before the Suda. Kidei lemayir ulagia lachilas matzah. There's a rush to eat the matzah. And why is that? Because of the children. You know, everything in the Seder revolves around the children. And we're afraid that the children might fall asleep before we get to the matzah. So we want the children to stay awake. And therefore, there's a vested interest, says the Tos Yontif, in getting as fast as possible to the Achilas Matzah. And if we would read the entire Hallel as part of Magid, that delays the Achilas Matzah and runs the risk of the children falling asleep. And he says the following. There's a machlokes between Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai hold that we should only read one paragraph, one kapitel of Tehillim, which is called in Hebrew Mizmar Echad, before the Suda. So according to Beit Shammai, we have a really reduced part one of two parts of the Hallel, a very reduced part one, only has one Mizmar. Beis Hillel Sovrim, Kevan shebevarech miyad li achar mikan birchas hageula. The Geula reached its culmination with Kriyas Yamsuf. Kriyas Yamsuf is an integral part of the process of Geula, and therefore the Hallel, insofar as it's integrated into the bracha of Gal Yisrael and precedes that bracha, should include also a mention of Kriyas Yamsuf. Therefore, Beis Hillel came up with the idea and insisted that we read not only the first Mizmar of Hallel before Gal Yisrael, but even the second Mizmar of Hallel, because in the second Mizmar, Muzkeres bo Kriyas Yamsuf sheba nishlama gulasam. The second Mizmar mentions Kriyas Yamsuf. And now the Tosas Yontif is going to prove that Kriyas Yamsuf is the ultimate culmination of the Geula. Shenemar bo, with regard to the Geula, it says, Vayosha Hashem es Yisrael miyad Mitzrayim, and that pasuk introduces Kriyas Yamsuf. Now, if we take out a Haggadah for a moment, and we look at the structure of Hallel, before Gol Yisrael, our Haggadah reflects the Shita of Beis Hillel, and the first paragraph, the first Mizmar, right before the Brach of Gol Yisrael, which opens up Hallel, is Hallelujah, Hallelu Avdei Hashem, speaking about the praises of God as the Avdei Hashem, the servants of God extol God. No mention at all of Kriyas Yamsuf. So no doubt, Beit Shammai would argue that Hallelu Avdei Hashem is an allusion to Yetzias Mitzrayim, because we only became Avdei Hashem after the termination of Avdus Lepara. And there was a replacement of Avdus Lepara with Avdus Hashem. And therefore, the Avdei Hashem after Yetzias Mitzrayim will sing God's praises. But there's no mention of Yetzias Mitzrayim here, and certainly no mention of Kriyas Yamsuf. So Beis Hillel now, agreeing that we have to really rush it up and condense and abridge the Hallel, but they insist on adding another Mizmar. B'tzeis Yisrael miMitzrayim, Hayom Rav Vayonos. Which Yam? Anybody? Which Yam are we talking about, says the Tosas Yontif.
The Yam Suf?
Yam Suf. I don't know. I don't understand. How could the Tosas Yontif tell me that we're talking about Yam Suf? The Pasuk says, Hayom Ra'av Hayanos, Hayarden Yisov Liachar. We're talking about the Yarden. God split the waters twice. Once Yam Suf, and a second time the Yarden, when Yoshua crossed the Yarden with the entire Jewish people, all 12 Shvatim. I don't get it. The best I can do is that the Tosas Yontif is splitting one pasuk into two parts. The Reisha refers to one Yam, and the Sefer to another Yam. Hayom Rav Vayonos, that's referring to Yam Suf. And then Hayarden Yisov Liachar, that's already a different chapter in Jewish history, which is going to happen a full 40 years later when Moshe dies and Yoshua takes over the leadership and crosses the Yarden. But truth be told, I don't think we can avoid that conclusion of the Tosas Yontif. I'll tell you why. Because the Yarden is not a Yam. To the best of my knowledge, you will never find the word Yam referring to the Yarden. The Yarden is called a Nahar, not a Yam. So you could travel down to Eilat and see the Yam, but if you want to go to the Jordan, you're not going to see a Yam. You're going to see a Jordan River. So that the pasuk now is split into two parts. The first part of which Hayom Rav Hayonos, which Yam? That's Yam Suf. And here's where Beit Shammai and Beis Hillel insist, we are thanking Hashem, singing his praise for Kriyas Yam Suf, which is the end of the Geula. And then Hayarden Yisov Liachar. That's already the Yarden. And it's interesting that even in the second half of this Mizmar, a few psukim later, again, David HaMelech praises and extols the Almighty for both Kriyas Yam Suf and for the splitting of, or shall we say, the drying up of the Yarden. Because a few psukim later it says, Malacha hayam kisanus, again yam, hayarden tisov liachar. Yam and then Yarden. So that split in which David HaMelech integrates two great miracles of the splitting of water into one single psalm, one single mizmar, that's indicated here in the second mizmar that Beis Hill insists should be recited before Gal Yisrael, because Gal Yisrael refers to not just the Exodus itself, but also to the Kriyas Yamsuf. And in fact, in our Haggadah, as we have it, there are many, many paragraphs about all the makos that took place at the time of Kriyas Yamsuf. The various Tanoim and the different calculations, what the numbers were, 50, 200, 250, whatever the numbers are there. So we see that Kriyas Yamsuf is part and parcel of the Gadatul Bincha, which, again, as we said over and over again, is a mitzvah of Shevach HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Shevach has to incorporate the entire Geula, which is made up of two parts, of Yetzias Mitzrayim and of Kriyas Yamsuf. That's the thesis of the Tosas Yont. I have a problem with accepting this thesis of the Tosas Yontif because of the Rambam. If you open up to the Rambam, in the chapter that he dedicates to the mitzvah of Higadatul Bincha, and this is Perek Ches Mihilchas Chametz Umatzah. I'm sorry. Perek Zayin Milchas Chametz Umatzah. Mitzvahs Aseh Shel Torah, L'saper b'nisim v'niflos, shenasu lavosenu b'mitzrayim b'leil chamishasar b'nisan. The Rambam clearly indicates that our mitzvah is to speak about the miracles that happened on the night of the 15th of Nisan. When did Kriyas Yamsuf take place, my friends? A full week later. There's no mitzvah, according to the Rambam at least, to speak about the miracles that took place 1 week later, on the 7th day of Pesach. In fact, after the Hilchas Chametz Umatzah, the Rambam adds an addendum. What do they call it? An appendix, I think they call it, or something like that, right? And that's the Nusach HaGodah. Now, if you take a look at the Nusach HaGodah to Rambam, how many times does he mention Kriyas Yamsuf? Zippo, not once. He concludes his Haggadah with Rambam Gamliel, Omer Kol Shelo, Omer Shlosha Dvarim, Elu BePesach, Pesach Matzu Mor, Bechol Dor V'Dor Chayav Odom Liros Es Atzmo, etc. Lefichach Anu Chayovim Lahodus Lahalel. That's it. Not a single mention of Kriyas Yamsuf. I don't know. And again, the Rambam's paskin like Beis Hillel, and he requires that we recite the first two Mizmorim, but the entire section about Makos and the numbers and how many plagues there were at the time of Kriyas Yamsuf, all that is omitted. And if you take a look at Dayenu, as we have it in our Haggadah, let's take a look. It says, Ilu nasan lanu es mamonam v'lo kara lanu es hayam dayenu. The ilu kara lanu es hayam v'lo avirenu b'lesocha b'charava dayenu. Ilu aviranu l'socha b'charava lo shikat tzarenu b'midbar v'betocho. There are 4 dayenus about Kriyas Yamsuf. How many of them appear in the Haggadah of the Rambam? 0. Not one of them. In fact, if you sang Dayenu for the Rambam, he would probably listen very carefully and he would ask you, where did you get that nice song from? But it's not part of his Haggadah. However, we had yesterday an insight of the Vilna Gaon in footnote number Yud Zayin. And if you recall, let's review it very quickly. The last paragraph of Magid, according to the Gra, should be broken down into parts, each part of which reflects on a different experience of Bnei Yisrael. Hotzionim Yavdus Mitzrayim Lecherus. Right? And then he's going to say, Umiyagon l'simcha l'fisha hayu b'tzara gedola kodem kriyas yamsuf. And God took us out to simcha after kriyas yamsuf. There was a tzara that's called yagon. They were surrounded on all sides, and there was simcha. What was the simcha? Kriyas yamsuf. So we see that the Gaon for sure introduces Kriyas Yamsuf into the very fabric of Magid. And the Tosas Yontif is on the same page. So we have both the Gaon and the Tosas Yontif, both of whom introduce Kriyas Yamsuf into Magid. The Rambam is on the other side of the Yamsuf because he doesn't have Kriyas Yamsuf anywhere in his Haggadah. The mitzvah of this night, according to the Rambam, is to speak about the miracles that took place on Leil Chamishasar. However, there is another possible way of reading the Rambam. I'm going to put a comma in a different place. Mitzvahs Aseh Torah, l'saper b'nisim v'niflo shenasu lavoseinu b'Mitzrayim. Comma, B'leil Chamishasar b'nisim. He's not, the phrase of B'leil Chamishasar b'nisim is not an interpretation of mitzvahs aseh l'saper, but rather it's telling you the time for the mitzvah. The mitzvah must be fulfilled on the night of the 15th. And the Rambam goes on to prove it. That's Leil Chamishasar b'nisim. But as I said before, nowhere does the Rambam seem to indicate that Kriyas Yamsuf is part and parcel of the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzvah. Now, on Heichanu Omer Beit Shammai Omrim Ad Eim Abonim Smecha, the first Mizmor. Beis Hillel Omrim Ad Chalom Shlomayim Mayim, the second Mizmor. And then Chosem Begeula. What does that mean, Chosem Begeula? He completes the Haggadah with the bracha of Gal Yisrael. What is the bracha of Gal Yisrael? And that we have a machlokus in the Mishnah. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Asher Galanu v'Galas Avoseinu Mitzrayim. It's what we call a bracha ktsara. What's the difference between a bracha ktsara and a bracha arucha? A bracha arucha has an extra baruch at the end. There's another blessing as the chasima. So you open up with a baruch and you end with a baruch. Like, for example, if you have Hallel as your example, you start with a bracha, etc., and then you end with a bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem, Melech Gadol Ba'olam B'Tishbachos, at the end of Hallel. That's a bracha arucha. We have something similar in Psukei the Zimra. We open up with a baruch, Baruch Sha'amar, and we conclude at the end of Yishtabach with another bracha. That's a bracha arucha. It opens with a baruch and closes with a baruch. A bracha kitsara has only one baruch. And Rabbi Tarfon identifies Gal Yisrael as a bracha kitsara. And therefore, v'lo yuchosen, he does not add a chasima, a bracha at the end, just the bracha at the beginning, asher galanu. Who disagrees? Rabbi Akiva Omer. Rabbi Akiva says that Kain Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoseinu yagienu l'moadim v'legar l'macherim haboim l'koseinu shalom smeichim b'vinyani recha v'sasim b'avodasecha v'nochal sham min hapsachim u'min hazvachim Baruch Atah Hashem Gal Yisrael. So how do we measure a bracha arucha? We can identify it because it has not only a bracha at the psicha, but also a bracha at the chasima. That's fine. But what is a bracha arucha that requires a second chasima? Now, the normal general rule of brachos, as formulated by Chazal, is that there's one theme for one bracha. Every bracha has a theme, a motif, or a topic. The exception to that rule is rare, and that is where there are two different themes in a bracha. How do we justify a multiple themed bracha? And the answer is we're going to have two barachos. The fact that we have two brachos in effect makes one bracha into two, reflecting the two themes of that bracha. So according to Rabbi Akiva, the bracha of Gal Yisrael, which completes and ends Magid, has two parts to it, two themes to it. Number one, Asher Galanu v'Galas Avoseinu, which means that we are reflecting on the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu redeemed us from Mitzrayim. And we could say Galanu because Chayav Adam Liros Atzmo. And number two, Rabbi Akiva adds a whole nother theme to the bracha of Gal Yisrael, and that is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring us the Beis HaMikdash will be restored, rebuilt, and then we'll have Moadim Regolim and so forth, Smechim, etc. And we'll eat from the Zvachim and the Pesachim, and that requires, as a multi-themed bracha, another bracha, what we call a chasima, classifying this bracha as a bracha rucha. How do we identify it? Because it opens with a baruch and closes with a baruch. In fact, we could go even a step further. According to Rabbi Akiva, the bracha of Gal Yisrael at the end of Magid, not only does it have two different themes, but it has two different, fundamentally different dimensions of tefillah. On the one hand, it has the dimension of shevach, of praise and thanksgiving to Hashem for having taken us out of Mitzrayim. And number two, it has an element and a dimension of bakasha. And it is a petition to the Almighty to bring about the situation in which we can eat from the Pesachim through the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. So if you have a bracha that's made up of both shevach, and when I say shevach, I mean hodaya, and tefillah and bakasha, then it becomes by definition a bracha rucha, and it requires a chasima. Does anybody have a siddur? Just a regular siddur. Let's see if I can find one. Let's take a look for a moment at Birchas Kriyat Shema. We'll start with Shachris Bracha Lefanel. That bracha opens up with a baruch, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Yotzer Or Uvarich Choshech, etc., and ends with a baruch, Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMa'oros. This is a bracha arucha, opens with a baruch and closes with a baruch. And the answer is very simple. There are two themes over here. First of all, we are expressing our thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and praising him for his great works. Right? He's created the Meir La'aretz. But then we have an element of tefillah. Where do we have that? Well, first of all, we have Or Chadash Al Tzion Ta'ir. Okay, that's certainly a tefillah. But I think there's one even before that. Just 1 second. Here it is. Elokei Olam B'Rachamecha Rabim Rachem Aleinu Adonu Zenu Miskav Ba'adenu Magen Yishenu Miskav Ba'adenu. Do you see that? Rachem Aleinu? As soon as you see Rachem Aleinu, automatically you know that you're dealing with a bracha rucha that's going to require a second baruch at the end. Now let's look on at the last bracha of Kriyat Shema before Kriyat Shema Avarabba or Avas Olam, whatever your nusach is. And what do we have over here? We thank Hashem for his great love, Chemla Gedola, Kamalto Aleinu, and then all of a sudden, we shift the theme to a bakosha. Avinu Makenu, blah, 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 Kain Tchanenu, Samdenu, Hamrachi Rachem Aleinu, Sembeli Benu Lavinu Laskil. And it culminates with Avienu L'Shalom, Me'abakar Fosa Oretz, V'Solichenu Komiyus L'Artzenu. A classic bakosha. Baruch Atah Hashem, and it requires a chasim. Let's fast forward to the bracha lachreha, which is called emes v'yatziv. And it begins with shevach v'odoya, and we speak about God as Elokei Olam. He's the Magen Yish'enu. Shmo Kayam, Hu Kayam, Shmo Kayam, Malchuso, Ve'nasolo Ad Kayames, etc., etc. So that's Shevach V'odoy. But then, Sur Yisrael, Kumabi Ezras Yisrael. What's the theme now? Is anybody following me here? Updeichin umecha Yudav Yisrael. We're asking for Geula. What is that? Is that Bakosha or is that Shevach V'odoya? I'm going to assume you all know the answer, just that it's a problem of Zoom. So I'm going to answer it myself, which I'm not happy about, but this is a question. What?
It's a bakosha. It is a bakosha.
Excellent. Thank you so, so much. You can't imagine how much you make me feel good that I know you're with me here. And therefore, Baruch Atah Hashem, Gal Yisrael, we need a separate Asima, because what kind of bracha is it? A bracha arucha. Now let's fast forward to Arvis. Okay, so we have Kriyat Shema Shel Arvis. And we start with the first bracha lefaneha. Asher b'dvaro ma'ariv haravim b'chachma poseach sharim b'smuna meshanei itim, etc., etc. Clearly Shevach V'odoya. Where's the bakosha? Kel chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu l'am v'ed. We ask and beseech Hashem that He should reveal His malchus. We know that malchus of Hashem is a reality, but it's not revealed. Baruch Atah Hashem, and we have a chasima. We go on to Avas Olam. Toru mitzvah, so suddenly Yantanu, Shevach V'odoya. But then we have Aschal Tasir Mimenu L'olamim. We beseech you, O God, not to remove your Ava. Baruch Atah Hashem, and now we need a Chasim. By the way, there's no Psicha in Avas Olam because it's a Bracha Smucha L'chavret. Now let's fast forward to Emes Ve'emuna after Kriyat Shema. And once again, we start with Shevach V'odoya. Hapodeinu mi'ad malachim. Malkeinu agol aleinu, etc. Hakel hanifra lanu mitzareinu, hamashalein gvul l'chol evei nafsheinu, oseh gedolos arin cheker. Hamadricheinu al bamos oiveinu. Hosel lanu nisim v'nekom v'fara. So where does it shift the theme to Bakosha? And we say, Hashem yimloch li'olam v'ed. So what is that? Is that a bakasha or is that a sheva? There are two ways of interpreting it. It could be we're just repeating the shevach that our forefathers sang and expressed at Yam Suf, and then it's pure shevach. Or it could be that Hashem Yimlochi Olam Va'ed is a bakasha. And once again, we're asking for the Malchus of Hashem to become a reality that's clear to everyone. From the very fact that it has a chasima, Baruch Atah Hashem Gal Yisrael, I derive the conclusion that we're dealing with a bracha arucha, and we shift our theme from shevach to bakosha. Hashkiveinu Hashem Elokeinu l'shalom. Here I get lost. This bracha is monolithic. It only has one theme. It's all bakosha from beginning to end. So why do we have to add a chasima? And I have two possible answers. One answer is Ushmar tzeisenu vo'enu l'chaim u'l'shalom. That is a bakasha. But before that, Kikel shomreinu matzilenu ota. Kikel melech hanu v'racham ota. We are praising Hashem and describing Him as the shomer umatzil who extends chanun v'racham. That makes it into a complex bracha, i.e. a bracha arucha, and we have to add a chasim. But I have another thesis here. Even if I would grant you that this bracha shkivenu is a bracha ktsara, it still needs a chasim. Because it doesn't have a psicha. Why doesn't it have a psicha? Because it's smucha lechaverta. There's an entity, a body called brachos, birchas kriyat shema. It's part of that entity. So there's a unifying factor, and it allows the bracha at the beginning to be connected to the end. But the only problem is, since it's a separate bracha, you've got to have a baruch somewhere. You can't open with a baruch because it's smucha lechaverta, so we close with a baruch. Okay, so in any event, we see over and over again this concept of a bracha arucha. Again, it's rare. It's in terms of percentages, it's probably less than 10% of all the brachos, but Rabbi Akiva classifies Gal Yisrael at the end of Magid as a bracha arucha, because in his bracha he introduces bakasha, in which we beseech Hashem to bring about the restoration of the Beis HaMikdash and the avodas hakorbanos v'nochal sham min hapsachim min hazvach. Now, before the machlokas between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva, we have two words in the Mishnah. And we're not sure what to do with these two words. It says, V'chosem b'geula. What does that mean, V'chosem b'geula? Is he talking about the chasima, and he requires Baruch Atah Hashem Gal Yisrael, in which case the Tanakama is really Rabbi Akiva? Or v'chosem means he completes the Magid with the bracha of Geula, and he could be holding like Rabbi Tarfon, that Rabbi Tarfon holds that there's no chasima. So if you take a look at footnote number Chaf, you will see that the Rashbam and Tosfos, he says, Tanakama Shomer Chosein Begeula, Lo Piresh Em Daito Sheyesh Chasima LeBrocha, Lo. Is he holding like Rabbi Akiva, there's a Chasima, or like Rabbi Tarfon, there's no Chasima? If there's no Chasima, so what does it mean for Chosein Begeula? Lo Ba El Hashmiya Sheyesh L'Sayim Es Hagoda B'Brocha Ala Geula. What was the Havamina that we would not need a broch at the end of Magid? The answer is, we have 4 kosas of yayin, the second of which is on Magid. And the bracha on the second kos is Borei Priya Gofen. Right? Again, let's look that up and see if that's correct. I have one of these Haggadahs that has more commentary than the Haggadah itself, so you just have to keep, turning pages and pages. Yes. After Gol Yisrael, Baruch Atah Hashem, Borei Priya Gofen. So there's a Havamina that Borei Priya Gofen would suffice as a brach on Magid, because the second kos is the kos of Magid, and the brach on the second kos is Borei Priya Gofen. Bilei Ploim. This is an amazing piece of lumdus here, that a Borei Priya Gofen could serve as a bracha on Magid. Now, what is Borei Priya Gofen, Rabosai? If in the classification of brachos, we have Birchas HaNenim, Birchas HaShevach Hodoya, Birchas HaTfilah, where would you classify Borei Priya Gofen? Anybody around? Well, this is hard for me, really hard.
Baruch HaNenim.
Say it
Baruch
again.
HaNenim. Baruch HaNenim.
Correct, so Birchas HaNenim. Now, how could a Birchas HaNenim be chal on Shevach Vodoya? I mean, we're talking about thanking Hashem for redeeming us from Egypt, and now you're borrowing Borei Priya Gofen. Apparently, Borei Priya Gofen is not just the Birchas HaNenim, but it's also, it's like it's a schizophrenic bracha. It's got two faces, and it's also a Birchas HaShevach Vodoya. And where do we see this? In Kiddush. Right? Kiddush is a Birchas HaShevach Vodoya, and the Borei Priya Gofen is an integral part of Kiddush. As I heard from my Rebbe a million times in the name of Chaim, Borei Priya Gofen in Kiddush is part of the Kiddush. If he omitted Borei Priya Gofen, he was not Yotze in the midst of Kiddush. And the Gemara tells me, Ein Shira El HaYayin. So the brach that was established on Yayin is not just a Birchas HaNenim, but it's a Birchas HaMitzvah. In fact, let's say on Friday afternoon I was drinking wine, and I made a Borei Priya Gofen. Now the sun sets, and it's time for Kiddush. Do I make a Borei Priya Gofen? Yes. Why? Because the first Borei Priya Gofen is just the Birchas HaNenim, but now I need a Birchas Borei Priya Gofen as part of the Shevach Vodoy of Kiddush, if you're with me. And therefore, the Borei Priya Gofen could suffice as a bracha of Shevach Vodoya on Gal Yisrael. And the Havamina was, I didn't even need a bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem, Gal Yisrael. Now we have another machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon. What is the Seder HaBracha? The Tanakama just said V'chosei Begula, but he didn't tell me what's incorporated into the content of the bracha. And Rabbi Akiva now argues on Rabbi Tarfon, but he's not arguing on the Tanakama. In other words, he agrees to the Tanakama that Bori Priya Gofet is not sufficient. We need a separate bracha on Geula. However, Rabbi Akiva says that the bracha on Geula has to end with another baruch. So we'll have a psich on the bracha. Bracha to Hashem Elokeinu V'Chol Asher Golanu V'Gol Avososenu, and a chasima bracha to Hashem Gol Yisrael, because it's a bracha arucha as we discussed. Now, how do we paskin? So if we only had a machlokas between Rabbi Tarf and Rabbi Akiva, we might very well paskin like Rabbi Tarf. That would shorten our Haggadah. But if Rabbi Akiva accepts the Tanakama, as we just explained, then it's not Rabbi Akiva as a Yachid, but Rabbi Akiva and the Tanakama. So we can pass it like Rabbi Akiva. So if Rabbi Akiva argues against two Tanoim or more, then we don't pass it like Rabbi Akiva. But if Rabbi Akiva argues against one Tana, then we pass it like Rabbi Akiva. And here, Rabbi Akiva is not alone, but he's together with the Tanakama against Rabbi Tarfon, and therefore we pass like Rabbi Akiva. And now we have a kash of the Orches Chaim. Why is Bori Priya Gofen recited after Gol Yisrael? We should be reciting Bori Priya Gofen before Gol Yisrael. Why? Because the second kos is the kos of Gol Yisrael, of Magi. Why recite Bori Priya Gofen after you've already completed the Magid? Tzrichim levarech lifaneo Bori Priya Gofen kimoshe matzina b'kiddush. Right? Whenever you have a bracha with a kos, then you begin with Bori Priya Gofen, and then you recite the bracha on the kos. So the bracha on the second kos is Gol Yisrael. You should begin with Bori Priya Gofen. Why does Bori Priya Gofen come after Gol Yisrael? Elo hi bracha b'fnei atzma al mashe erachnu b'sipur anisim u'geulas Yisrael. I don't get it. I don't know what he's saying. Anybody have it? The cash I understand, the teretz I don't have. Let's think. Let me just try to present his thesis, and then we'll see if we can make any sense out of it. The halacha of bracha ala kos, which we've discussed in the past, that whenever we have a birchas hashevach, we want to recite that bracha over a kos. The bracha itself on the kos sets up the relationship between the kos and the bracha that succeeds it. So it's critical that the bracha, namely bar priyagofen, precedes the bracha in order to create a seder habrachos, in order to create a unit of brachos. So the bracha itself needs an introduction of a kos, right? The bracha has to be recited on a kos. And we set up the kos with the bar priyagofen. We don't drink the kos because we're only going to drink the kos after the major bracha, the essential bracha. But we recite the bar priyagofen to set up that kos as, or let me say it a little differently, to set up the bracha as a bracha ala kos. So it's not enough just to take a cup of wine and recite Kiddush, for example, on the cup of wine. You need to set up that cup of wine as a kos shel bracha. And if you work in the opposite direction, you need that the bracha be a bracha ala kos. And that means that you set up the kos before the bracha. So the bracha is now under the umbrella of the kos. Do you follow what I'm saying? If you were to recite the bracha and then drink the kos, or then introduce the kos, then who says that this kos is related to the bracha? I mean, again, it's might be related in time. You know, Tolkidei Dibra, that he finishes the bracha, then he says a bar priyagofen drinks a kos. That's not enough. So the bracha requires a kos, meaning it's got to be set up on a kos. How do you set up the bracha on the kos? And the answer is by setting a kos with a bar priyagofen, and then proceeding to recite the bracha, in this case, Kiddush, let's say. And the exception to that rule is Gal Yisrael. We will not recite the bracha bar priyagofen until after the Gal Yisrael. Why? So again, I have the structure. I have the mechanics, but I don't know why. And I think the answer is the following. Again, just at one level, and it needs more and more. In other brachos, the obligation is a bracha. For example, Kiddush. We have to recite Kiddush in the form and the structure of a bracha. Kiddush without a bracha, at least midrabanan, would be meaningless. The Chazal will mesaken that your recitation of Kiddush and your expression of thanks and gratitude to Hashem should be in the structure integrated into a bracha. Now you have a chiyuv of bracha ala kos. As we said before, the kos has to be set up before the bracha with the bari pri hagaf. Not so in the case of Gal Yisrael. I don't need the bracha to establish the mitzvah itself. The mitzvah itself excuse me. The mitzvah itself is meaningful on its own. The Torah commands me to be mesaper benisim v'nislos on the geula of Yisrael b'Mitzrayim. That mitzvah self-establishes. I don't know how to say it in English. You know, it creates itself. I don't need a bracha to create the significance, or shall we call it the kiyum, of Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim. The Torah commands me on this night to speak about Yetzias Mitzrayim. When I do so, it has meaning unto itself. It stands on its own 2 feet. I will conclude with a bracha, but I don't have to begin with a bracha. So the entire Magid, from Halach Ma'anya through Manishtana and Avodim Hayinu and Maskil B'Gnus and Doreshis Aram Yovid Avi, the Parsha, etc., all that is meaningful unto itself and does not require bracha, because that itself is the kiyum of Higadat L'Bincha of Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now, I've experienced the Geula Mitzrayim, Chayav Adam Liros Esatzmo. Now I have to be Mevarech Hashem. Now there's a Shevach Vodoya on the fact that we left Mitzrayim. And that Shevach Vodoya is only meaningful within the framework of a bracha. Hence, the bracha of Gal Yisrael at the conclusion of Magid. So it's almost as if I am working hard and climbing higher and higher to achieve the level of Chayav Adam Liros Atzmo. And that's my movement throughout the entire Magid. And that's the ultimate kiyum of Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim, when I feel like I myself left Mitzrayim. Ah, you left Mitzrayim? Then you have to thank Hashem for that. And we're going to establish a bracha which will have the essential elements of thanking Hashem for the Geula Mitzrayim. Galanu v'gal savosein. Now, after having completed Sipi Yetzias Mitzrayim and thanking Hashem in a bracha for Yetzias Mitzrayim, now we set up the second course with a bar priagof.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I'm not positive we talked about this before, but I thought we did. After the first cup, you could theoretically drink wine, not as a kos. So is it possible that we have to do the Gaal to close things off to show that this second drinking is really the second kos?
Let me try to reformulate what you're saying, and you tell me if this is what you're saying. If we were to begin Magid with a kos, it would be confusing, so to speak. We would not recognize, it would not be absolutely clear that that is a kos of the four kosos. It might be construed as if that would be a shtiya shel rishus, just that, I'm in the mood for a cup of wine. Is that what you're saying, Steve? No. Okay. So tell me again what you're saying.
Right. So that's, to really, isolate it enough so that you know that it's the second cup. And so I think, the way you reformulated, yeah, is a definite way of saying it.
Could be. I don't know. Maybe you're right. There is some truth to that. I mean, that's certainly not what he says here. He says, Elahi bracha b'fnei atzma al ma sheherachnu b'sipur anisim v'gulas Yisrael. Okay, Rabbi, so we'll stop here. I mean, a lot to think about. And the Mitzvah Hashem, in about 8 minutes, we'll learn Masechet Sanhedrin. Okay, then? All right, good. Thank you so much. Have a great day.